I'm sitting here in my yellow 66 Grand Prix trying to think of the direction to go with the white 66 Grand Prix. I talked to my top advisor, my dad, and he said, well, what do you want to do with it? I said, I want to get it on the road. Somebody else can enjoy it, and they won't just park it behind the garage or something like that because there's too much work to be done. And he said, well, just get it to that level. So that's the advice I'm going to go with. That's good advice. The long and the short of it is I need to sell both 66 Grand Prix, the white one and the yellow one, to raise the money to do the frame off restoration that I want to do on the blue 66 2+2 that I'm going to keep for myself. So we just kind of got to go with that in mind. We're not going to cut out and put in all new floor pans or truck pan or anything like that. We're just going to cut out the rust, weld in new metal, get it watertight, get it on the road for somebody else to enjoy. And it'll be a good, cheap classic for somebody. It's not going to be a $30,000 car. It's not going to be a $20,000 car. You know, like this yellow car, it's going to be just a nice, cheap classic. We all know how expensive classics have gotten these days, lately especially. So let's get it on the road. Let's get it watertight. Let's get it looking good. And let's get it on the road for somebody else to enjoy. Here's where we're at. We've got white everywhere that there's real bad rust. So obviously this has a heater core leak. I don't know if it's been addressed or not. We're gonna have to check that though. But there are little rust holes that we're gonna have to patch. Here, obviously all this, here, and definitely right there. So we're not gonna spend $500 on floor pans. I've got a sheet of 18 gauge that I've used on two of my other cars, Grand Prix. So those are the major areas that we're gonna get to today. I'll show you guys how to cut them out, weld in some new, and we'll get going with that. I've also, this roof rail is very brittle, so I've ordered that, ordered a gas tank, anything rubber on the engine, heater, hoses, upper and lower radiator hose, got all that ordered, thermostat. We're gonna have to clean up the center console too. It's pretty nasty. So we're gonna get on it. We've got a time crunch today. Not only is it gonna rain, so we've got to have this other bay freed up to put the yellow car in, because we're not gonna leave the yellow car out in the rain. But also we've got to get the old blue car ready for a car show this afternoon. So we've got a lot to do. So here's the setup. We've got a drill for drilling the holes on the perimeter, and then we'll weld through those. We've got a grinder with a cutoff wheel to make our cuts, marker to mark our cuts, some gasket makers. Some people use different stuff. I'm not certified in anything car related. This is just trial and error. This is just what I've done in the past, and it seems to work. I've been doing this since I was 12 years old. I bought my first car when I was 14. And this is kind of how I fix, this is my way of doing it without buying the actual patch panels. So I've got a sheet of leftover 18 gauge from the blue 65 Grand Prix. They don't sell patch panels. They sell inner and outer rockers, but they don't sell patch panels for like the lower part of the fenders or the quarters. So you have to make your own. And so my wife and I did. We cut the rust out and made our own patch panels, welded them in, and I had my friend Eldon Tate match the paint, the original paint, and we painted from that eyebrow trim down, and it looks great. I'll put some pictures up right now before and after. But all you need is a little flux welder from Hobo Freight or wherever. They're like $100 on Amazon, I think, too. So the biggest thing is you want some kind of cleaner that leaves no residue so that you could weld to clean metal. Let's get started. Some of the safety stuff you're going to want are obviously some thick gloves, fire extinguisher. We are grinding and cutting and all that good stuff. Sparks will fly. Something to shield your face. I like this one because just goggles. Sometimes sparks can get in on your hair and don't want to burn yourself up. So I like this kind of shield. Also a grinding wheel. We're going to find where the good metal is, and we've got to get it down to bare metal. So these are some of the other things that you're going to need for this job. All right, let's get started. Looks like we've got our plan, our square. Gathers pock holes in those, especially up here. But what we're trying to do is just cut out the stuff that is the worst. And the rest of that, like I said, we're just going to spot weld it anyway through rust. Like I said, we're just going to spot weld it through drill holes and then put the gasket maker around it to make it watertight. So we're going to go ahead and use the cutoff wheel and cut this square out. And I will go inside on my cuts, inside the decent metal. I'm not going to call it good metal. Even doctors will mark on your leg or your arm that they're operating on. So cut yourself a break, mark which side you're going to do it. I've done it wrong and had to do a whole lot more work to fix it. But here's our cut, and we've got enough metal there easily to patch it. We'll have to form it a little bit, which is easy. I'll show you how to do that too. There is our frame support. It's dirty, but it's all there. Did nick it a little bit, but I tried really hard not to. All right, that looks really good. I'm really glad. I hope you guys could see that. It was a little blurry. But there's what we got. On this one, I want a full inch all the way around. So I'm just gonna measure it up, mark my corners, use my tape to make straight lines, and cut it out. Pretty easy. This should work. Before I start cutting, I'm gonna mark my holes to drill. It's much easier to do on a sheet than it is just by itself. So these are my holes I'm gonna drill. Some people obviously would want more holes than that, but this is what I do. I went ahead and set this up outside. You can't contain the sparks. Make sure you have something that will keep you from getting burned, even your legs. So I've got a fireproof apron on, and also those are fireproof chaps. I don't know what to call them. Something to protect my legs because I don't like wearing long pants. All right, let's get going. All right, got our piece. As you can see, it's flat, the floor's not. We need some shape here, don't we? For me, and this isn't the right way to do it, I'm sure, but I just find a good solid piece of wood And if I want to curve one end, I'll just hit that end just a little bit. Definitely should wear gloves. Until you get the curvature that you want. Okay. See how it lifted up? We need that to lift up in this corner and this corner, and then we'll go fit it, test fit it. See how that goes. So this side looks pretty good, the curvature on it. Let's get it where it's gonna go. Right there. So this curvature is good, but whenever I push on it, this has some flex. Now when we weld that down, obviously it's gonna stay down, and so if you have a little bit of flex in it, it's fine. Or at least for the girls I run with, right? We definitely need to curve this up just a little bit more out to here. Okay, setting up for welding. Got my ground. Make sure it's not a painted surface, obviously. I've got the gasket maker I'm gonna put around the edge, welding mask, magnet, weight, flux welder, and of course something to put out the fire. I've also put flame retardant material underneath where I'll be welding. Not moving, it is definitely there. So all we're looking to do is spot weld in the circles, maybe 4 times, 4 places in each one, and then clean it up with the grinder. It's not gonna have, you know, dimes like a real welder. It's just a flux welder. It's basically a tack welder. Basically you're tacking it in, and that gasket maker, when it dries, will keep it waterproof and it won't move around underneath the carpet. Of course, we're going to put some sound deadening insulation on that too, and then the carpet. And the carpet has jute, which is another material, sound deadening material under it. But I'm going to go ahead and get that spot right there. And there's a couple pinholes here, so I'm going to weld in a piece there. And I'm probably going to have to weld a pretty good sized piece in here. But I'm going to go ahead and get on that, and I'll bring you guys in when it's done. Okay, so that piece is done. Piece is done. Okay, hit it with some nice rust inhibitor. Let's take care of the surface rust. And I re-sealed the drain there. Looking good. There's that other one I forgot to show you guys a minute ago. Cut that out. So since this is not going to be a show car, it's just going to be an enjoyable driver for somebody, and I can't keep it. I can't afford to keep it and do a frame off on that 2+2. So I'm going to have to get rid of 2, maybe all 3 of my Grand Prix. The wife says she's the money. So you can see we've got some pits in here, and we have a few spots that are gonna have to be welded in, and there's some pinholes that need to be addressed here, which we'll just fill. But in order to see what I'm working with, after I've scraped off all the, basically it's growth, rust growth kind of mushrooms out, then I like to use the, something to inhibit the rust, and then a fillable primer, and I always keep gray for that reason. I'm not going to even splatter paint this. I'll show you guys my blue 65 Grand Prix that I did. The trunk was a lot worse than this in both the other Grand Prix before I fixed them. And I'll kind of show you the show level, and then this is more of a driver's level trunk. So. Here's a trunk floor. It was done years ago. There's a patch there. And there. Metal patch. And then the rest was real pitted. So this has got the speckle paint, splatter paint, whatever you want to call it. And the trunk pan was never replaced. Just exactly what I'm doing in the white car. Take the rust blooms out, is mushroomed out, put the rust inhibitor on it, and then this was repainted the factory splatter paint. But that stuff is so expensive, and this is more of a show car. That's why I've got the tiger tail in it. More of a show car, obviously, than what the white one over there is going to be. It's more of a driver. So you have to make that decision how far you're going to go. We have our patch panels cut and marked, and now we'll use the grinder to cut these out. Obviously I'll cut them a little bit smaller than the marker line, and then we'll address these pinholes. You guys can see it now, they got the light on it. See all those little pinholes? We've got our patches tacked in, and I've already started kind of filling the spots around it, just to fill in some of the gaps and make sure it's watertight. But we've got a problem here. We've got all this pitting, and then we've got some pinholes. That's bigger than a pinhole, but we got pinholes here. I think that's dirt, yeah. Got a couple little pinholes. Here's a hole right here. And then we've got all this rough texture from their pits. They're just deep pits from the rust that we scraped off. And we've already put a rust inhibitor down, and sprayed it over with some Rust-Oleum, so it should not grow anymore. And what I do is I use basically a really high-end body filler that you can order through O'Reilly's, and I'll show you guys how to mix that up. It's really easy to do. Make sure you keep all the air bubbles out of it. I'll show you that too. But it went from a very pitted and porous, which I don't know if I can get it to where you guys can see that, very pitted and porous here, to very smooth here. And of course we'll sand that and make it even better, but it fills in all the pits. You can see where they were. It makes for a really nice trunk area when you're done. Okay, here's the setup. We've got our body filler. Put a nice little blob onto a clean piece of cardboard. I'm going to be using a lot, so I'm going to put a bunch on here. Try not to get air bubbles in it. Let it kind of this won't harden very fast. So you've got time to work with this right now. Let the bubbles come out of it. I don't know if you see this bubble's fixing to come out. It'll pop, let those bubbles come out before you do anything. And then you're going to add the hardener when you're ready. Well, I'm going to go straight down for some of this pitting right here. And let me move back a little. And these holes, this hole here and this hole here. So I'm going to need quite a bit. Now, the trick to getting the exact right amount of hardener, be sure to knead it up real good, is to go, if you have a circle, kind of a blob, right, of your filler, I just go from one end to the other with hardener. That's it. Just one end to the other. Take a plastic, this is by Bondo, Bondo brand spreader, and then you're just going to work it in and squish it down in there. So you're squishing the hardener into the filler itself. The more you can keep the there we go, spreader on the cardboard, the better, because you're going to put less air in it. I've seen some people, they'll chop at it, and that's how you get a lot of air pockets into your filler. You don't want that. So now we've got some filler ready to go with hardener. And I'm just going to go ahead and get enough for this little area. Push it into, I'm just going to push it down into the pits. There we go. All right. This is pretty easy to do, guys. And yeah, this is not a $100,000 show car. It's never gonna be. But you want your drivers to be weatherproof. So you want to make sure that the trunk is waterproof. And this is a cheap, if you want to say cheap or economical way to do that. You don't have to spend a fortune on body work to have a car that's waterproof. Now, this is starting to harden pretty fast, so I'm gonna have to start going a little faster, because as soon as it starts to get gritty, you can't use it anymore. And you can go back and clean those up in just a second. I'll show you guys how, with like a cheese grater. That's what I use, a cheese grater. All these pits need to be filled in. Now, some of you guys might say this is the wrong way to do it. You should cut and weld every piece, and that is true. That is the right way to do it, for sure. But some of us don't have that kind of money, and everybody should be able to enjoy a nice classic without having to spend that much money. That's really, literally the point of this channel, is to show you guys you don't have to have $1 million and a $100,000 car to enjoy this. I know I've said that before. That's the point. Okay, now, when you can't use it anymore, you'll be able to tell, because look how gritty that is. Look how grainy it is. You can't pick it up anymore. And I did to stop this video. This is just as long as the video actually is that it took to do that, to harden that much. So I'm going to go ahead and try to scrape some of this off. and show you guys what to do next here after this is dried for maybe a minute or two. Okay, it's been drying for less than a minute. I'm going to take this cheese grater, get them on Amazon for a couple bucks, and I'm going to go ahead and try to knock off some of this before it gets too hard to work with. And you can see that it'll take little strings. See this stuff? And I may have to wait just a few more minutes till it's just a little harder, but you guys get the idea of what I'm trying to do here. Just a lot less sanding if you could grab it early like this and get some of these areas knocked down, and then we'll have to vacuum it out. But knock down before it gets completely hard, because that's a lot to sand. These are the spots right here that I did, and it doesn't take long to dry completely, 30 minutes maybe. And as you can see, it's hard as a rock, but I can still take my cheese grater and kind of go against the grain here, knock off some of these high points. Here's a high point right here, and make it a lot easier on myself whenever I'm sanding. And you could feel it with your hand if it's a little rough. You want it pretty smooth, because as soon as you put that high build primer on here, which we're going to use next, you'll be able to see every little line. It doesn't hide. Okay. So we've got it mocked up here, and I've already used the cheese grater where I could. Get some of these high points. These are not pinholes, this is just more of the mushrooming. So able to knock those off and create a pretty semi-smooth surface. I mean, here you could really tell This is completely smooth to the touch now, but you can see where all those pits were, and it just fills them in really nicely. So I hope this helps some people that, you know, don't have the money to take their car to the body shop, and they're just dealing with moisture in their trunk all the time, which I've been there. I've done that. So that's why I kind of started doing this. But for less than $100, you could buy that gallon of really good high-end, it doesn't crack, body filler, and you could learn how to do this. That's all smooth too. So we're going to go ahead and sand this down, and then I'll put a layer of sandable fillable primer over it, and I'll get you guys back in here. So we've got our high build filler primer all sprayed over the work that we've done, and if you notice, I don't see any pinholes. I don't see any pinholes anywhere. I think we've got this secure. We will do some Rust-Oleum paint on the underside because we don't want any of that moisture to kind of seep in through the body filler. I don't think it will, but at the same time, we want to be safe and do it right. Since we're not cutting out the whole floor plan, we're not really doing it 100% correct, but this is going to get it, like I said, weather tight. And as soon as we put the seal in, this should not carry moisture anymore. So we're going to start sanding some of these areas like this. That's a little rough. I don't know if you guys could see that. A little bit rough right there. And that's a little rough right there. We'll start sanding some of these areas, make it look presentable. Like I said, we're not making a show car, we're just making a nice driver. So we're going to continue with that theory. So really the only difference is the light blue splatter. It's got the texture, it's got the base coat, the texture, and then I just don't have the white splatter, white light blue splatter for the other one. But it's not a show car, it's weather tight, and that's all that matters. So I've got the gray base and then the black texture, and I couldn't find any of the light blue splatter paint, so we're just going to do without that. But I think it looks really good like this, and it's completely watertight because all the new metal that was welded in over here.